Welcome to the Vine Resources Podcast Show with your host, David Lawrence.
Welcome to another edition of the Vine Resources Podcast Show. I'm absolutely delighted today to have with us Adrian Blair. Adrian is the Group CEO at Receipt Bank. Adrian, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks. Good to meet you.
Yeah, great, Adrian. And it's great to share with our listeners. You've got an amazing business and something that we all have challenges with. So I'm really interested to hear more about the company. Could you give our listeners a little bit of an introduction about yourself and Receipt Bank, please?
Yes, of course. So I'm Adrian Blair. I've worked in the tech industry in various guises for the last 20 years or so. I started out at ask.com. Some of you may remember that as Ask Jeeves, one of the early search engines. I joined Google after that, where I was for a long time in California and London. I left there to join Spotify back in 2010. When Spotify wasn't quite as famous as it is today, but was still a remarkable company in many ways. And then in 2011, I became the Chief Operating Officer of Just Eat, and I stayed at Just Eat for the next 7 years, and during which we scaled from a startup to a FTSE 100 company in the UK. And actually just earlier today, it sold to takeaway.com for £6 billion, mixed emotions at that. So I was the global chief operating officer there, running the sales, marketing operations teams around the world. And I joined Receipt Bank in 2019, so just under a year ago now, to scale the business globally. So Receipt Bank is an amazing product at automating the accounting and bookkeeping process for small businesses. So we work with around 360,000 small business clients around the world. We work with around 50,000 different accountants, and we're a platform that connects the accountant with their small business customers to make the whole process work way better for both sides. So I joined to really scale this around the world, and it's been amazing fun so far.
Fantastic, and something desperately needed between that link between that good customer experience and obviously the back office and the accounts as well.
Totally.
Tell us what you've obviously been in the business now for over a year. You're running the company. You've got an amazing team that you've got and you're building. What does a typical day in the business look like for you?
So for me, it's a lot of work with my direct team. So we've got an amazing senior management team across the world, and I spend time most days with them, making sure that I'm helping them to remove any blockers, to understand the direction that we're heading in, to help them with any challenges that are arising. So that's the probably the single most important part of what I do. Second thing I do is I talk to customers a lot. So I make sure that every week that goes by, I'm spending time with customers to hear from them what's really going on. I think that there's a real danger in these companies that you kind of disappear into your own fantasy land if you're not out there interacting with your customers and finding out what life is really like for them. So I make a point of doing that. Third thing is I travel quite a bit. So we've got offices in Sydney, in Washington, in Toronto. We've got a couple of hundred people in Sofia in Bulgaria. So I travel quite a bit to visit our teams. And I make sure that I'm interacting with the wider team inside the business. So I just came into this out of a meeting with our new starters in London. So people who came into the business in the last week, to make sure that they have a sense of what's going on and how great the company is that they've just come into. So it's a pretty varied role. But the single most important thing, I think, as CEO is make sure you've got a cracking leadership team that has a clear sense of direction and is able to do great things.
With that, such a diverse team placement, different time zones, different cultures. Just wondering, how do you keep that communication between the business? And is there any tools that you use as a company that you find really effective?
So I find most effective is a sort of old-fashioned tool of just talking to people. So I do a weekly global all hands, so 9 o'clock every Monday morning for half an hour, and never any more than half an hour. I do a global all hands, so the whole all of our different people from around the world dial into that. And it's recorded for people who are in time zones that make it impossible. So that's a great opportunity every week to just remind people of what's going on, get people into the zone after doing whatever they've been doing over the weekend. Have people working on anything special in the company showcase what they're doing that week. So that's pretty effective. We use Slack a lot inside the company, which I find pretty good. We didn't have that at Just Eat, but I find it works pretty well here. And I'm using WhatsApp for quite a few of my own team members. But I think the most important thing is having a culture where people feel that they can just talk to each other, and it's an open communication environment where if you've got an opinion on something, you feel you can just talk to the relevant person or pick up the phone to them and make sure that they understand your point of view.
No, Adrian, you've got an impressive CV behind you of some pretty amazing companies that you've worked for. But I'm curious, throughout your career so far, is there someone that's had an impact on you as a leader, and perhaps how they've helped impact your life?
I think one of the ones. I mean, I've had the privilege of working with some amazing people over the years, but one of the ones who had a huge impact on me was Larry Page at Google, and the reason was I'd been at business school right before joining Google. I did the MBA at Harvard for a couple of years, which was obviously very traditional, old school business education. And I remember arriving at Google and needing to present something in one of the exec team meetings back in 2004. With Larry Page and Sergey Brin and Eric Schmidt in the room. And I remember Larry asking, I was presenting a partnership deal, and I remember Larry asking the most counterintuitive sorts of questions. I expected them all to ask, why aren't you getting a better deal? Why aren't the commercial terms better for Google or whatever? And Larry's questions were things like, why aren't we being more generous to this partner? And will this deal still be relevant in 10 years time? And he was thinking in a very, very different way to the sort of textbook business school kind of fashion that I've been taught at Harvard, and thinking extremely long term, always thinking about the customer, always thinking about the partner's interests, not just your own interests. And that was a revelation to me that someone had been so successful by thinking in a completely counterintuitive way about business.
What are you doing from the top of the organization? We've spoken a little bit about it, but what are you doing to keep your employees really engaged?
So I would say it's work in progress. So this isn't something where you come into work one day and think that's it. We've nailed employee engagement. But I think it starts with giving people a really clear sense of direction and why they're coming into work every day, and having a culture where people feel they can bring their full self into work. One of the phrases I always hate is, I'll put my work face on and go to the office and pretend to be someone who I'm not. I think people do their best work when they're happy, and people are happy when they feel they can just be themselves and not have to pretend to be something they're not. And so having a culture where you respect people, which is very inclusive, where managers are rewarding people for the sorts of behaviours that you want to see, people get clear feedback if they're preventing others from doing that somehow, or causing problems in the culture. I think all of that is really important to just having a company where people know where they're going, are doing their best work, and are happy on a personal level.
What have you seen as the big challenges facing leaders of businesses right now?
I mean, there are many. I think one of the in terms of challenges that I guess there are challenges that are timeless, that have always been there, and they're challenges that maybe are more the case now than they were 10 or 20 years ago. I think timeless challenges are things like people management. How do you decide who the best person is for the job? How do you make sure that people are working on the right things? How do you give feedback to people? Just all the basics of people working with each other and communicating with each other. These are timeless challenges. But I think one of the more recent ones is dealing with information overload. We talked earlier about different forms of communication, and I said we've implemented Slack at Receipt Bank. Well, Slack's great, but it's also one more source of interruption and potentially distraction from more valuable activity. And I think as a leader, you get this in spades. You're copied on all kinds of things. You have an inbox that's kind of fire hose of information. You have Slack. You have people calling you. You get dragged into all kinds of different situations. And so I think as a leader, that's probably been a leadership challenge for a long time, but it's more of a challenge now because information is so much easier to share. And so as a leader, you're the recipient of so much more of it. And that's something you've got to have your own ways of dealing with that as a leader.
What's the best piece of business advice you've ever been given?
I would say being extremely proactive. I think I got that. I got that from one of my managers at Google, who said, this company, it's a very bottom-up culture. Don't expect your manager to tell you what you've got to do or tell you exactly what you need to do to be successful. You've been hired because you're smart and people think you'll be able to do some great things, but you've got to figure out largely what those things are and how you're going to accomplish them. So you were rewarded for being very proactive and innovative, and that I think pays off in a number of ways. But your colleagues appreciate it if you're proactive and they're not constantly having to chase you for stuff. You're generally more successful, but it's also just more fun. If you're proactive, you're taking the initiative, you've got your own agenda. That's just inherently more enjoyable than sitting back waiting to be dragged or told what to do. So I think that's probably the most important piece.
What's really exciting you in your industry right now?
I think what's exciting me is the amount that technology is going to do to change the lives of small business owners. So if I think about my last job at Just Eat, we worked with around 100,000 small restaurants globally, small independent restaurant owners. A substantial proportion of them went bankrupt every year. And they didn't necessarily have terrible businesses. They often went bankrupt because they weren't on top of their finances. They didn't understand the sort of basics of their cash flow. So 99% of businesses in the world are very small businesses and have these basic problems of cash flow management. And if you think about technology and what it can now do, there's kind of no real reason for that. Technology, in the past, it's been quite difficult to understand what's going on with your finances, with your cash flow. There's been smart people out there like accountants who could help you, but it's been quite costly and cumbersome to work with those people, because of the inefficiencies that you were mentioning right at the beginning. What excites me is technology is just going to make that so much more straightforward and so much more efficient. And we're moving to a world where no small business will have to go bust because of poor financial management. They'll be able to get the advice they need. They'll have technology to support them along the way as well. And this will make small businesses have advantages that large companies take for granted. Like, if you've got a CFO, you've got the luxury of having great financial advice right there inside your company whenever you need it. But if you're a kebab shop with 3 employees, you don't have that. So I think we're moving to a world where small businesses of any size will have a world-class finance team in their pocket, effectively.
I just want to touch on well-being. Obviously, it's a huge topic, day to day in the industry. What are you doing at the company to help your employees around their well-being?
So we're doing various things. I mean, I think the most important is what I was saying earlier about having a culture where people feel they can be themselves. I think it's not about accepting low standards or asking less of people. It's just about how people go about their work. I think people do more and do better work and achieve more if they're able to express themselves fully and take the initiative and bring their whole self to work. But in terms of other things we do, we're pretty strong on benefits. So we have private medical insurance that gives people support with mental health as well as physical health if people are having serious problems. Some people in the company enjoy flexible working, work from home occasionally, that sort of thing. But I think we're a culture, we're a company where we do care deeply about the well-being of our employees, and that's reflected, I think, in how our managers interact with their reports and look after them.
Adrian, is there a story from your childhood, your early years, that perhaps influenced your work ethic in later life that you could share?
I remember once we had, you may have had this as well, in your secondary school, we had homework diaries. So every week your mum or dad had to sign a page in your homework diary to say that you had done all your homework that week. And I remember I gave my dad my homework diary on the first week of the term to sign the page, and he took it and he signed the first page, but then he signed the second page as well. And I'm dropping my dad in it here, but he went through every page in that book and signed them all in advance. And he handed the book back to me and said, I trust you to get it done. And I thought at the time that was a slightly strange thing to do, but with hindsight, I think there's probably a bigger lesson there about taking responsibility and not expecting someone else to be looking over your shoulder, making sure everything's okay. And I think that's probably a more accurate representation of the way the world works.
If you were now crystal balling maybe 3 to 5 years ahead, what do you see the industry perhaps looking like, and how may that also impact your business model?
I think the industry will If by that you mean software for small businesses and financial software for small businesses in general, I think the industry will be a lot larger, and that far more small businesses will have adopted software like this, and I think far more accounting firms will have realized the benefits of cloud software as opposed to desktop accounting software, which lots of them are still on. And there's all kinds of benefits to accountants of putting information in the cloud instead of having it sit on the desktop of all your clients. For a start, you're all then looking at the same information updated in real time, and not having different multiple versions of the truth. So I think you'll see far greater adoption to cloud. You'll see a far larger ecosystem industry of companies providing software to small businesses, and you'll I think just see a landscape where financial management for small businesses is a huge amount better than it is today.
If going back to your 20-year-old self and just giving yourself one piece of advice, what's one thing you'd say now?
I think I would say keep being creative. Keep your creative spark. I think if I look back at myself when I was 23, 24, 25. No doubt there's a lot of things I'm better at now than I was then, but I think I was a lot more creative then. I was coming up with a lot of new random ideas very easily. And I think to some extent, being in a professional environment for a long time starts to, if you're not careful, beat some of that out of you. And I think, my advice to any 20-something would be keep that creative spark alive, and don't listen to people who are trying to put it back in the box.
What Adrian, if people, and thanks for sharing that with us today, if people want to find out more about you, want to connect with Receipt Bank or find out more about the company, I know you're growing quickly, so lots of things in your careers page, how would they do that?
They should drop me an email, adrian@receipts-bank.com.
Fantastic. Or check out the website at receiptbank.com. Adrian, thank you very much for joining us.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye.
We really hope you enjoyed the podcast today. If you want to listen to more exclusive tips and life lessons from our guest, go to the resources page at vineresources.com.